She answered my heart and hand, but the obese girl was sent to the wrong mountain man. The rope creaked like an old door in winter. Eleanor Pemberton stood on a barrel in the middle of Timber Creek's main street, her wrists bound with rough hemp that bit into her skin. Dust swirled at her ankles. The August sun sat hard and white above the rooftops, turning every breath into heat and every heartbeat into thunder. The crowd that had laughed at her days ago was quiet now, not out of pity, out of fear. A deputy shoved the noose higher under her chin, and Eleanor tasted the sour, metallic panic in her mouth. She could hear the saloon doors swinging behind her, the piano inside stumbling through a tune no one was listening to. Somewhere close, a horse stamped. Leather creaked, a revolver cylinder clicked, slow and deliberate, like a man winding a clock. On the boardwalk, Harold Weatherby stood beside Sheriff Wilkins. Clean vest, clean hands, clean eyes. His voice cut through the silence with the sharpness of a knife. "This is what happens," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "when an outsider comes here and tries to ruin a respectable man's name." Eleanor's throat tightened. She wanted to scream that she hadn't tried to ruin anyone. She had only answered a heart and hand advertisement and ridden 6 weeks west on hope and ink and fragile trust. But her mouth was too dry. Her gaze jerked to the far end of the street when a shadow shifted in the line of buildings. A man stepped into the light, not a townsman, not a deputy, something heavier than both, tall as a barn door, shoulders broad as a mule team, dressed in worn buckskin with a Sharp's rifle slung across his back. Thaddeus Kane, the mountain man they whispered about, the one who didn't come down unless death was following him. He didn't shout, he didn't beg, he simply walked forward, boots hitting the boards like hammer blows, eyes fixed on the rope around Eleanor's neck. Then he stopped, lifted his head, and said one sentence that made the whole street go cold. "She answered my heart and hand ad," Kane rumbled, "and you sent her to the wrong man." He took one more step, hand drifting toward the rifle strap, and the sheriff's jaw clenched as if he just realized the town had made a mistake. It could not survive. Before we rewind to how a marriage advertisement became a hanging, tell me this. Where are you right now, and what are you doing as you start this story? 2 days earlier, Timber Creek looked like any other Colorado boomlet pretending to be civilized. A single, dusty main street, false front buildings with proud names painted in fresh black letters, a saloon that stayed bright long after sunset, a church that stayed quiet even on Sundays, a post office that smelled of ink, old paper, and men's impatience. But Timber Creek was not run by law. It was run by reputation. Harold Weatherby understood that better than anyone. He was 35, narrow-shouldered, always clean, always measured. His hair was combed like he'd never known wind. His hands were soft, like they'd never known work. And yet every man in town listened when he spoke, because Harold owned what mattered: the general store's credit book, the freight contracts, and the quiet friendship of the judge in Denver who owed him favors. When Harold walked, he didn't hurry. He let people move around him. He had built himself into a kind of local religion, and Timber Creek, eager to believe in something respectable, worshipped. That was why the day Eleanor arrived, the town square went still. She stepped down from the stagecoach with dust on her skirt and fatigue in her bones, carrying a battered trunk and a dignity she'd forced herself to keep intact for 6 weeks of travel. She was 26, with dark hair pinned tight, a face that might have been called pretty in kinder circumstances, and a body the crowd decided was an offense before she spoke a word. She had learned long ago what happens when people think they're allowed to laugh. Their eyes did it first, then their mouths. "She's the bride," someone murmured. "A man ordered a wife and got a wagon load," another voice hissed, and a few people snorted like it was harmless. Eleanor did not shrink, not outwardly. She lifted her chin the way her mother had taught her in Boston, back when their names still opened doors. She came to Timber Creek with letters folded in her bag like scripture, each one promising that a man did not care about looks, that he wanted kindness and intellect, that he wanted a companion who loved books and quiet. Her hands trembled anyway. Then Harold Weatherby appeared at the store's threshold, and the tremor became something worse. He stared at her as if she'd stepped out of the ground. "You're Miss Pemberton," he said, already uncertain, already calculating. "I am," Eleanor replied, voice steady through sheer effort. "Mr. Weatherby, I'm glad to meet you at last." His gaze slid over her like a cold measuring tape. He didn't mean to make it obvious. He simply didn't know how to hide disgust. "You're larger," he said, and it sounded like a verdict. "Much larger than I expected." Eleanor's fingers tightened around her trunk handle. She wanted to remind him of her first letter, the honest one, the one that warned him plainly. She wanted to pull out his reply, the one that claimed appearance didn't matter. But Harold's eyes had already flicked to the watching crowd, to the councilman lingering near the hitching rail, to the women in bright summer dresses waiting for entertainment. And in that moment, Eleanor understood something that settled into her chest like a stone. Harold had never wanted a wife. He wanted a story that made him look good. He cleared his throat as if preparing a speech. "I can't," he said quietly. "This can't happen. People will talk. It would damage my standing." The town did not gasp. It leaned in. Eleanor's world narrowed to the heat of the sun, the grit of dust on her tongue, and the sickening weight of having nowhere to go. She turned away with as much grace as she could drag out of humiliation, and she started walking as if her feet knew the way. But Timber Creek was not done with her, because at the far edge of the square, near the feed store where men bought flour and bullets, a shadow moved. A man stepped out, like he'd been carved from the mountains themselves, too big for the town's delicate lies. Thaddeus Kane. He didn't live by their rules, and that was what made them uneasy. His buckskins were sun-faded, his beard was thick, his eyes were dark and direct, the kind that didn't look away first. And when he looked at Eleanor, he didn't look at her the way the town did. He looked like he recognized her, like he'd been waiting. Long before Timber Creek whispered Thaddeus Kane's name like a warning, he had been someone else. He had grown up in Denver, back when the city still pretended it might be gentle. His father ran freight wagons. His mother taught piano in a narrow house that always smelled faintly of ink and boiled coffee. Thaddeus had been broad even as a boy, too large for school desks, too quiet for crowded rooms. People mistook his silence for dullness. They always did. Then the cholera came. It tore through Denver in the summer heat without caring who deserved what. In less than a week, his parents were dead. His younger sister followed 2 days later. Thaddeus buried them himself because there was no one else left to do it. That was the first wound, the one that never closed. The second came a year later when he tried to stay. He took work with a freight company hauling supplies into the mountains. On one run, bandits hit the caravan at dusk. Guns cracked, Horses screamed. In the confusion, Thaddeus saw a boy about his sister's age pinned beneath a fallen wagon, crying for help. Thaddeus hesitated, not because he didn't care, because fear froze him in place for half a heartbeat too long. The boy died before Thaddeus reached him. That was when he left. He went into the mountains, not because he hated people, but because he couldn't forgive himself. The wilderness was simpler. It punished weakness immediately and honestly. No polite lies, no watching children die because a man was afraid to move. For 10 years, Thaddeus lived above Thunder Ridge. He built his cabin log by log. He hunted, he trapped. He read the books his mother had loved, their pages soft from being handled too often. At night, when storms rattled the shutters, he dreamed of wagons breaking apart and voices calling his name from places he could not reach. That was the man who wrote a Heart and Hand advertisement. Not out of loneliness alone, but out of exhaustion. He was tired of surviving without living. He did not ask for beauty. He asked for honesty, intelligence, kindness. Someone who understood quiet, someone who knew what it meant to feel misplaced among people. When Eleanor's letter arrived, he read it twice before he trusted himself to breathe. She wrote plainly about books, about caring for others, about knowing she was not small and refusing to lie about it. There was no bitterness in her words, no self-pity, just truth. Thaddeus answered carefully. Every sentence mattered. Every word was chosen the way a man chooses footholds on ice. Over 6 months, the letters became his anchor. He learned her fears, her humor, the way she noticed small kindnesses most people ignored. He learned she loved piano music because it made silence feel gentle instead of empty. And somewhere along the way, Thaddeus realized what terrified him more than solitude: disappointing her. That fear followed him down the mountain when he finally came to Timber Creek to collect supplies. He planned to leave the next morning, letters safely tucked in his coat, believing Eleanor was still far away in Boston. Then he heard her name spoken in the street. He saw the crowd. He saw Harold Weatherby step back, as if Eleanor were something shameful. He saw her turn away, carrying humiliation like a physical weight, and the old wound split open. This time Thaddeus did not hesitate, because the goal that had formed inside him was suddenly clear, sharp, and non-negotiable. He would not let fear cost another innocent person their future. Not again. Not when he finally knew what he was willing to fight for. The square had not fully recovered from the shock when another tension slipped into the air, quiet but sharp as a drawn blade. Sheriff Murphy arrived late. His boots hit the dirt with a measured pace, not rushed, not careless. He was a tall man in his 50s, mustached, with eyes that had seen too many bad endings to be easily fooled. Timber Creek trusted him, but they also feared him in the way people fear men who remember everything. Murphy took in the scene without speaking. Harold Weatherby standing rigid with humiliation, Eleanor holding her bag like a shield, and Thaddeus Kane, a mountain man no one had seen in nearly 2 years, standing between her and the town like a wall of flesh and intent. "What's going on?" Murphy asked at last. Weatherby spoke first, eager, sharp. He framed the story as broken expectations, public embarrassment, lost money. He talked about reputation, contracts, propriety. He never once looked at Eleanor while he spoke. Murphy listened. Then he turned to Thaddeus. "And you?" Thaddeus did not raise his voice. He did not posture. He simply reached into his coat and produced the letters. One by one, he placed them into the sheriff's hands. "Those are addressed to me," Thaddeus said. General Delivery, Timber Creek, signed by Eleanor Pemberton, every one of them. Murphy flipped through them slowly. His brow tightened. He recognized handwriting now, dates, postmarks, mistakes only a frontier mail system could make. Then he looked at Eleanor. "Did you write these?" "Yes," she said. Her voice did not waver. "Every word." Murphy exhaled through his nose. "Then Weatherby doesn't have a leg to stand on." The crowd murmured. Harold's face flushed. "That doesn't change the embarrassment," Harold snapped. "People think I brought her here. This town, Murphy cut in, doesn't get to decide a woman's worth based on surprise." Silence followed, the kind that lands hard. Murphy stepped closer to Thaddeus, lowering his voice. "You know this is going to stir trouble. You take her up that mountain and people will talk. They'll test you. Maybe worse." Thaddeus nodded once. "I know. And you still want to do it?" "Yes." Murphy studied him. Not the size, not the scars, the eyes, the steadiness behind them. Then Murphy did something unexpected. He turned to Eleanor. "Miss Pemberton, I need to hear it from you. No pressure, no man speaking for you. What do you want?" Every gaze locked onto her. Eleanor swallowed. The old version of her would have apologized, would have softened her words to avoid offense. But something in Thaddeus's stillness gave her room to stand straight. "I want to go with the man who wrote to me," she said. "The man who listened, the man who did not flinch when he saw me." Murphy nodded. "That's enough for me." Weatherbe exploded. Threats followed. Lawsuits. Judges in Denver. Social ruin. He promised to make Thaddeus regret humiliating him. Murphy stepped between them. "You do that," he said calmly, "and I'll remember every word you said today. Judges don't like men who reject a woman publicly and then claim damages." That was the end of it. As the crowd dispersed, Murphy lingered. He looked at Thaddeus once more. "Thunder Ridge is a hard place," he said. "Harder with two." Thaddeus answered without hesitation. "So is the world down here." Murphy gave a short nod. "If trouble follows you, send word. I don't like bullies, no matter how clean their coats are." That was the deal. Not written, not signed, but real. They left Timber Creek at dawn. The town was quiet in the way frontier towns often were before trouble caught up to them. No music from the saloon, no laughter, just the sound of hooves on packed dirt and the faint creak of leather. Thaddeus rode first, his rifle across his back, posture relaxed but alert. Eleanor sat behind him on the saddle blanket, her hands gripping his coat at first, then loosening as the rhythm of the horse settled her nerves. The mountains rose ahead, dark blue and unforgiving, Thunder Ridge cutting the sky like a scar. They had gone no more than 2 miles when the first test came. 3 riders appeared on the trail ahead, blocking the narrow pass where the foothills began. Local men, ranch hands by the look of them, but carrying themselves with the confidence of men who believed the law would never touch them. "Turn around," one called. "She doesn't belong up there." Thaddeus reined in the horse without a word. Eleanor felt his back tighten beneath her. "She's not property," Thaddeus said. "Move." The men laughed. One of them slid his hand closer to his revolver, not drawing, just reminding everyone it was there. "This is Weatherby's mess," another said. "He's paying for delays. We're just collecting." Thaddeus dismounted slowly. No sudden movements, no anger in his face. That frightened them more than shouting ever could. "You're standing on my trail," he said. "Last chance." They hesitated, not because they were kind, because every man in the region had heard stories about Thunder Ridge, about what happened to men who tried to force their way up. One spat into the dirt, another cursed. Then, one by one, they backed their horses aside. As Thaddeus mounted again and rode through, Eleanor realized her hands were shaking. "You didn't even reach for your gun," she whispered. Thaddeus didn't look back. "Once you do, the mountain remembers." They reached the cabin by nightfall, solid timber, smoke rising from the chimney, safe but isolated. Eleanor felt both relief and fear settle into her chest. The second trial came faster. 2 days later, while Thaddeus was cutting firewood downslope, Eleanor heard the horses first. Hooves, too many, too close. She grabbed the rifle Thaddeus had shown her how to load, hands clumsy but determined, and stepped onto the porch just as 4 men dismounted. Strangers this time, not local, hired. "We're here for the woman," one said. "You can step aside." Eleanor's heart hammered. Every instinct told her to retreat, to hide, to wait. Instead, she raised the rifle. "I won't," she said. They laughed. Then one of them stopped when he saw her eyes. Not brave, not defiant, just unyielding. Thaddeus emerged from the trees behind them, silent as falling snow. The sound of his rifle being cocked ended the laughter. He did not fire. He did not threaten. He named them. He knew where they drank, who paid them, which trail they took back to town. That knowledge broke them faster than bullets ever could. They left without another word. That night, Eleanor sat by the fire, shaking so hard she could barely hold her cup. "I thought I would freeze," she admitted. "I thought I would fail you." Thaddeus knelt in front of her. "You didn't," he said. "You stood." The third trial was quieter, more dangerous. A letter arrived a week later, carried by a boy from town too young to understand what he was delivering. A legal notice. Denver seal. Harold Weatherby had followed through. Claims of breach, financial damages, a demand for Eleanor's return or compensation so high it was meant to crush. Eleanor stared at the paper until the words blurred. "This is my fault," she said. "I should have gone back. I brought war to your door." Thaddeus took the paper, read it once, then fed it to the fire. "You didn't bring war," he said. "You revealed it." Still, doubt crept in that night. She lay awake listening to the wind, thinking of Boston, of rooms where no one ever raised a rifle, of lives that did not require courage every morning. She imagined Thaddeus alone again, safe from scrutiny, safe from her trouble. At dawn, she packed her bag. When Thaddeus returned from checking the traps, he found her standing by the door. "I can leave," she said. "I won't fight you. I won't make this harder." Thaddeus looked at the bag, then at her face. "Is that what you want?" "No," she said, tears finally breaking free. "But I'm afraid I'll destroy what little peace you have." He stepped closer, not touching her. "I lived 10 years without peace," he said quietly. "Silence is not peace. You didn't ruin my life. You gave it weight again." She dropped the bag. The fourth trial came with blood. Late one afternoon, shots echoed from the ridgeline. Not warning shots, real ones. A hired gun, desperate or foolish, tried to make good on Weatherby's threats alone. He didn't expect Eleanor to spot the glint of a rifle barrel in time. She shouted. Thaddeus moved. The exchange was short, brutal, final. When it was over, the man lay wounded but alive, pinned by fear more than injury. Thaddeus bound his wound and sent him back down the mountain with a message. "Tell Weatherby this ends now." That night Eleanor washed blood from Thaddeus's hands. Her own shook, but she did not look away. "I don't know who I'm becoming," she said. Thaddeus met her gaze. "Someone who survives," he answered, and someone who chooses. By the end of the month, the pressure eased, not because Weatherby grew kind, but because resistance became expensive. Rumors spread. The sheriff asked questions. Hired men refused the job. Thunder Ridge held. Eleanor changed too. Her steps grew surer, her voice steadier. She learned the land not as an enemy, but as a partner. She no longer apologized for her presence, and Thaddeus, watching her move through the cabin with purpose, realized something had shifted inside him as well. He was no longer guarding a fragile hope. He was standing beside a force. The mountain accepted her. But the town had not finished speaking. The twist did not come with gunfire. It came on a quiet afternoon, carried uphill by a man Eleanor did not expect to see again. Sheriff Murphy rode alone this time. No deputies, no badge polished for show. Just an older man with tired eyes and a horse that knew the trail too well. Thaddeus watched from the porch as the sheriff dismounted. His hand stayed away from his rifle, but his body angled protectively, the way it always did when trouble approached. "I'm not here to arrest anyone," Murphy said before either of them spoke. "I'm here because I should have come sooner." They sat at the rough wooden table inside the cabin. Eleanor poured coffee, her hand steady now, though her chest tightened with instinct. Murphy took a long breath. "The order against you," he said to Eleanor, "never should have existed. Weatherby didn't go through Denver courts like he claimed. He went through Judge Harlan in Carson City." Thaddeus's eyes narrowed. That name carried weight, too much weight. "Harlan retired," Thaddeus said, "years ago." Murphy nodded. "Retired, yes. Powerless, no. He still signs papers, still owes favors, and Weatherby bought one." Eleanor felt cold spread through her arms. "So this was never about the letters," she said, "or the mistake." "No," Murphy answered. "It was about ownership. Weatherby didn't want a wife. He wanted to prove he couldn't be refused. When you chose otherwise, he made it personal." Thaddeus leaned forward. "Then why now?" Murphy hesitated, then spoke the truth that cracked the room open. "Because I recognized your name in the records, Kane. Thunder Ridge, the land dispute from 12 years ago." Thaddeus went still. Eleanor turned toward him. "What dispute?" Murphy's voice dropped. "Your family's land was never legally seized. The mining claim that pushed you into the mountains was forged, signed by the same judge, Harlan." Silence pressed down like snow. Thaddeus's jaw tightened, but his hands shook. Eleanor saw it. For the first time, she saw fear in him. "They killed my father over that land," Thaddeus said slowly. "Shot him when he refused to leave. I was told the law was against us." Murphy shook his head. "The law was sold." Eleanor's breath caught. The danger they'd faced wasn't random. It was a closed circle. Weatherby wasn't just chasing control over her. He was protected by the same rot that had destroyed Thaddeus's past. "You were never meant to stay hidden forever," Murphy continued. "And neither was this." Thaddeus stood, pacing the cabin like a caged animal. Years of isolation, of believing retreat was survival, suddenly reframed as something else. Running hadn't saved him. It had only delayed the truth. "If I fight this," Thaddeus said, "they'll come harder, not just for me." He looked at Eleanor. "For you." She didn't look away. "Then we stop running," she said quietly. Murphy studied her. "If you take this to court, publicly, you'll be dragged through town, through newspapers, through men who will tear you apart just to protect themselves." Eleanor nodded. "They already tried to sell me once. I survived that." Thaddeus stopped pacing. For the first time since Eleanor had known him, he looked torn between two selves, the man who hid to survive, and the man who might stand and burn everything down to protect what mattered. "I've spent my life believing peace meant staying invisible," he said, "but they found us anyway." He turned to Murphy. "What happens if we go to town?" Murphy met his gaze. "Then the truth walks into daylight, and daylight makes cowards desperate." Eleanor stepped beside Thaddeus, close enough that he could feel her there without touching. "I didn't come all this way to disappear again," she said. "I came to be seen, with you." The decision settled between them like a final stone. Thaddeus exhaled. "Then we go back," he said, "not to hide, to end it." Outside the wind shifted. The mountain did not protest. It waited. They rode into Timber Creek at noon. Not at dawn. Not under cover of darkness. Noon, when the sun stood directly overhead, and there were no shadows left to hide in. The main street froze as soon as people recognized the man on the horse. Thaddeus Kane, the mountain man who was supposed to stay above the tree line. The man people whispered about but never expected to see ride straight through town with his back straight and his eyes forward. And beside him sat Eleanor Kane, her posture calm, her chin lifted, her presence undeniable. The courthouse bell rang once, then again. Judge Harlan stood on the wooden platform near the gallows, flanked by Weatherbe and two hired gunmen. The noose hung beside them, swaying slightly in the heat, an unspoken threat meant for anyone foolish enough to challenge authority. Weatherby smiled when he saw Eleanor. "You came to your senses," he called out. "Good girl." The crowd shifted uneasily. Thaddeus dismounted slowly. Eleanor followed, steady on her feet. Dust clung to her dress. Sweat darkened her collar. She did not care. "She is not yours," Thaddeus said. His voice carried. "And neither is this town." Judge Harlan raised a hand. "This court." "No," Eleanor interrupted, stepping forward before Thaddeus could stop her. "This is not a court. This is a stage." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Sheriff Murphy emerged from the saloon doorway, badge visible, rifle in hand. Behind him stood two deputies who had quietly switched sides when the truth reached them. Murphy spoke clearly. "Judge Harlan, you are under arrest for forgery, bribery, and abuse of office." Harlan laughed. "On whose authority?" Murphy nodded toward the crowd. "The truth's." Weatherby's smile cracked. His hand drifted toward his gun. That was when Thaddeus moved. Not fast, not reckless, just enough. His rifle came up. The sound of the shot slammed into the street like thunder. The bullet struck the rope above the gallows, snapping it clean. The noose fell uselessly into the dust. Gasps exploded from the crowd. "This ends without another body," Thaddeus said, "or it ends with all of yours." Weatherby drew anyway. Eleanor shouted his name. The second shot rang out. Weatherby dropped, clutching his shoulder, screaming in shock more than pain. Thaddeus had aimed low, a message, not an execution. Harlan staggered backward, face pale. The hired gunman froze, hands in the air. For a long moment, no one breathed. Then Murphy stepped forward, cuffs in hand. "It's over," he said. Eleanor stood beside Thaddeus, her hand resting on his arm. She felt the tremor there, the cost of choosing to stand instead of hide. The crowd slowly began to understand what they were seeing. Not a monster from the mountain, not a foolish woman who didn't know her place, but two people who refused to be owned. As Weatherby was dragged away, he spat blood into the dirt. "You think this makes you respectable?" he snarled. "You think they'll ever accept you?" Eleanor looked at him calmly. "I don't need acceptance," she said. I have truth. The train whistle sounded in the distance, signaling departure. The moment had passed. The choice had been made. Thaddeus lowered his rifle. For the first time, the town did not look at him with fear. It looked at him with something closer to respect, and maybe regret. Timber Creek did not celebrate. Frontier towns rarely did when the truth came out, because truth left behind too many mirrors. Judge Harlan was taken east in chains, his quiet network of forged claims and bought signatures unraveling faster than anyone expected. Men who had once nodded politely to him suddenly could not remember his name. Records were re-examined, land returned. Old wrongs, long buried, were dragged back into the light. Weatherby survived. He lived long enough to watch his reputation collapse. Customers stopped coming. Suppliers pulled contracts. Within 6 months, his store stood empty, its windows boarded, his name spoken only as a warning. Sheriff Murphy kept his badge. For the first time in years, he wore it with something like pride. Thaddeus and Eleanor did not stay in town. They rode back up the mountain at dusk, leaving behind a place that no longer had power over them. Timber Creek carried on, quieter now, more careful. Up on Thunder Ridge, the cabin door closed against the wind. Smoke rose again from the chimney. The mountain remained what it had always been, unimpressed by titles, unmoved by lies, and within its silence 2 people built a life that no court could threaten. Out on the frontier, the law could be written in ink or carved into wood, but it only mattered when someone was willing to stand behind it. Eleanor and Thaddeus learned that dignity is not granted by towns, courts, or reputations. It is claimed through choice and protected through courage. In a world that tried to decide their worth by appearances and power, they chose each other, and in doing so, chose truth over fear. Now I'll ask you this. As you reach the end of this story, where are you right now, and what are you doing while these final words settle in? Tell me in the comments.